If the conclusion of your practice session is, I guess I gotta just practice it a million times, I gotta say, you're probably practicing incorrectly, right? It's very common when you're practicing to have feelings like, why is this easier for other people? I guess I just don't have it. Or, I just have to repeat this over and over and over and over again. That's the only way. Or maybe you have these practice sessions where it's like, I think I got worse by the end of that session. Or you've been practicing something for weeks and weeks and it just never really sunk in. If that's happening, it's probably because you're not practicing in the way that's going to be the most efficient. Because when it comes down to it, practicing is a science. It really just comes down to psychology. So the way that I like to think of this with my students at the jazz school is I like to think of your brain as a battery. And everybody only has so much, space in their brain for their battery, right? So let's imagine for a second that, there's two people, right? One person is at their lesson, right? And they're trying to play, maybe this phrase, maybe a Philly Joe Jones phrase they're working on, right? So they're trying to play the phrase, okay? And that takes a certain amount of their brain, okay? And then their instructor gives them a little bit of feedback. So they're thinking, okay, play the phrase, but also make sure you get the left hand on beat 3, okay? And then, they mess it up, and then they're thinking, oh man, I hope my instructor thinks I'm good, right? And that's taking a little bit of their brain. Now they're thinking, play the phrase, remember the left hand on beat 3, I hope the instructor thinks I'm good. And then because their brain is starting to fill up, then it takes a little bit more of their brain the next time, and they mess it up. And then the next thing that they think here is, wait, why am I messing this up? Like, I'm better than this. I should be able to play this. This is easy, right? And then the next rep when they play it, they mess it up again, and it's actually worse than when they started, right? And when it's worse than when they started, they start thinking, oh man, maybe I'm just not meant for music. Like most people, it's like easy. I see them progressing, da 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 da. Well, my peer, oh, he's so good. He's playing this and that. Then all of a sudden, it is like impossible to play that lick because you're spending your whole brain thinking about all kinds of other stuff and you don't have any headspace to actually play things right, okay? This is so common, and I've seen students kind of spiral when this happens. I've done it myself, where it's like, I played something, I played it wrong, I'm thinking about playing it wrong, right? And then because I'm thinking about playing it wrong, I don't have enough headspace to think about playing it right, and I just go down this rabbit hole, and then I have to maybe go take a break, maybe go do something else, or the next day I come back and I practice it, and it's actually better when I come back than when I was working on it before, even though it should be getting better as I go. But then when I come back, then by the ending of the practice session, it gets bad again because of this, because of my brain getting way too full. So how do we fix this? We have to have headroom in our brains, okay? So like our brains, they're like a computer with RAM, processing power, right? If you have 100 tabs open all at once, your computer starts to glitch in, right? It doesn't flow naturally, and it makes it hard for it to complete any one task. Imagine you were doing a really complex task like video editing, right? That takes a lot of memory. If you have a bunch of tabs open and you're trying to do all this other stuff and you're playing on chess.com and doing all these other things, it's going to be hard for the computer to handle the video editing, which takes a lot of processing power. So when you're practicing, what you have to do is like, this Philly Joe Jones lick, if you're practicing something that's good, you're practicing something that's hard, that takes a lot of processing power. It's out of your comfort zone. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be practicing, right? And so what you have to do is focus. You have to keep your focus on one thing at a time. So there's a lot of ways that I do this, For example, I try to give as little feedback as possible to my students unless they really, really need it. Because I know that as soon as I give a piece of feedback, then they're going to start thinking about it, and then they might not be thinking about what they need to be thinking about, right? I want them to really internalize the first thing before we add anything on, okay? And there's multiple methods that you can do this, right? Another method is, for example, if you have a big long phrase and you try to play it all at once, that's like going all the way up here with your battery, right? Instead of giving yourself one little bit of information at a time. Like for example, if you do this right, it's like, let's say there's a phrase that's 8 different notes, right? And this is what your brain takes to play just the first note, Boom. Okay, cool, I got it, right? And then what happens is you add on the second note and it takes a little bit more of your brain, right? Dun, dun. Okay, that was hard. Dun, 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 dun. Until it becomes muscle memory. And that's actually where what happens here, and this is the cool part, this is how the psychology of it works, is that the brain space that it took to learn 2 phrases before becomes the brain space that it takes to learn both phrases, right? So all of a sudden, you've got all this headroom where you can play the first 2 notes without even really thinking. And then you add the third note, right? And then the third note gets folded into this low headroom. It's chunking it all together, right? It's just like the first time you learned ka-at, right? It's hard to remember each one of those letters. It's 3 letters. But eventually you just kind of clump them together in your brain and it's easy to remember. It's all one piece of information, right? So this is really how you do it. You have to focus on one thing at a time and ignore all other factors. Another way that I like to do this is a big thing my students work on is ideas for soloing, right? And you know, a lot of times, for example, we'll go into a transcription and they want to just learn the whole transcription, right? And the whole transcription is so overwhelming. It's, 74 bars of ideas that they can barely play. And so they never internalize one idea and they can't build any sort of like little groupings that are muscle memory that are easier to play. So they get overwhelmed and then nothing happens and then it just gets worse and worse, right? Instead, what we do is we start with the first bar. Can you play the first bar? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Great, that sounds good. Or if you can't play the first bar, can you play the first beat, right? And what happens is you get the first beat down and then it becomes one of these little clumps like this. So it's actually very easy to think about. And you have headroom to start to internalize it, to start to add the next beats, okay? Another thing that we do with this is with recommendations. So this used to happen to me a lot when I was, in college, is I had a big band rehearsal and I had a big band director who was awesome. He gave us lots of feedback and he was very concerned with the time and the tempo, as any good big band director should be, right? Not my tempo. And he would always tell us after, we played each section, rhythm section, a little too fast, play slower. Okay, so I'd be like, okay, try to play slower, try to play slower. And he'd be like, rhythm section, a little too slow, play faster. And then I'd be like, okay, try to play slower and try to play faster. Wait, and you can see that my brain's starting to do this. It's starting to fill up with slower, faster, and then you're like, well, now it's too slow. Oh, now it's too fast. Now it's this, now it's that. And then all of a sudden, I can't play anything. And I start missing notes because the actual big band chart, the music and the sound was the bass line down here. And because I fill up my brain with all this slower, faster, I don't trust myself, right? And it's hard to just let it flow, just let it come out naturally. This is where people struggle with flow in jazz music, is they fill up their battery with all this different stuff. Flow is when you're not even thinking, right? It's like when you're driving your car. You're not like brake, gas, turn 90 degrees, slightly less, right? Red light, green light, yellow. No. It's autopilot, right? You don't have to think about it. It's instinct. It just flows, right? You're listening to a podcast. You're talking to your friend on a road trip. You're talking to your mom on the phone, right? That's how you want your playing to be, okay? So how did I fix this when I was in college and I was in those big band rehearsals, right? Here's what I did. This is a technique. Is that when I was playing, let's say this is the thinking that I need to do in order to play the chart, right? The green down here, okay? And that's the thinking I needed to do. Okay, so then I played it and then he's like, it's a little too slow, okay? What I did in the past is I would spend my whole brain trying not to play slow, all right? Don't play slow, don't play slow, don't play slow, right? And then it messes up the green part. We know how that works, okay? What I did instead, when he said, you're playing a little too slow, is I would go, got it. That's all I would say. Very little information, right? Got it. And then the next rep, I would think, I don't care. Why? Why did I say that? Not because I didn't trust him, not because I didn't want to listen to what he was saying, right? He was right, it was a little too slow. But if I focused all my brain on it being too slow, I would mess it up even more. So I did what I call the LaCroix version, right? Like a LaCroix, you drink a lemon LaCroix and it tastes like the memory of a lemon, like the idea of a lemon. It doesn't taste very strong, right? And that's how I think about it, is I don't focus on it, but because he said it, it's an intention that's kind of in the back of my head, right? So maybe it takes up that much of my brain instead of this up much of my brain, right? And the beautiful thing is that much of my brain was more than enough to still play it correctly and not play it too slow, okay? So basically, I was still just focusing on this, right? I was still just focusing on playing it correctly, but I had this intention kind of in the back of my head that, oh, it's a little too slow, right? The thing that's so powerful about our brains is they don't operate off of like, if I tell it more things will happen. No, they actually operate off of, if I have more headroom and more space, then things kind of just happen automatically, actually. This is why, this book, The Inner Game of Tennis, I love this book. It's kind of a mindset book. He talks about if you're, trying to hit the ball and you're thinking, okay, as soon as my ball comes to 90 degrees, I'm going to rotate it 60 degrees and then I'm going to follow through and then turn my elbow and then lift my shoulder. Oh my God, so many details, so many places for things to go wrong. But if you just think, I want the ball to go over the net. Just imagine the ball going over the net and you just see it going over as you swing your racket, then your body will figure out everything it needs to in order to do it. That's how our brains work. Our brains are like intention setting and intention realizing machines. That's why, the best jazz musicians, they're not thinking of like E minor 7 flat 5. They're not thinking of 4 plus 3 plus 7 plus 8 plus 10. They did all that work before, but now they can just hear it. They just think of the sound they want. And because they have so much headroom and they're not all clogged up, then it just flows out naturally. So we always want to put ourselves in a state where we have a lot of that headroom so that our brains can do what they do best and just put together the necessary things that they need to in order to make the event happen, okay? That's really how you do it. So if you're struggling with this and you need some help on this, this is, I think, what most musicians struggle with more than anything, is like the mindset around this, the psychology around this. And I'm going to tell you in a second how like emotionally why people do this instead of this, right? This is one of the main things that we work with my students at the jazz school, is like how to practice correctly, how to get all the blockages out of the way, how to focus on the right things so that the time that you do have to practice, whether that's 8 hours or whether that's 1 hour or whether that's 15 minutes a day, that it's actually effective. Because this is the thing that makes musicians grow. It's not how much you practice or if you're a professional musician, it's how you practice and focusing on the right things. So if you want some help with that, click the link in the description. You can learn how to apply for the jazz school and to work deeper with me, okay? So here's the thing. Most musicians, even though you're probably like watching this and you're thinking, this makes sense, this is logical, this seems obvious, most musicians will not do this. They over and over again, especially like the beginner ones or the intermediate ones, over and over again, they will go to this. If I think more, if I practice more, if I fill up my brain, if I just figure it out, then it'll all come together. They go to that over and over again instead of, if I just clear my mind and focus, my brain will take care of the rest. Why? Why? Why do they choose one or over the other? Okay, here's why. When I said that, if I just clear my mind and let my brain take care of it, then it'll all magically come together. You might have had some resistance around that. Like, what do you mean, Jameson? That sounds kind of hippy-dippy. It's just gonna come together, right? It's just gonna magically play itself. I don't know, music's pretty hard, right? And that's exactly the reason why most people go for this, where they think really, really hard. Because they have this kind of belief that music's really hard and that they want to think that they're smart enough to be able to figure it out. And it's kind of like a proving yourself thing. Where this is more of a like patience, humility kind of thing, right? Like, let me show you what I mean a little bit. So, going back to this guy, on the green level, it's like, okay, cool, play this Philly Joe Jones lick. Boom. They play it, they miss one note. Okay, you missed one note. Boom. Okay, so I'm just going to think about that one note, and then it's going to work. And then they play it, and they miss two notes. Oh, wait, why am I not getting it? Okay, focus really hard, try really hard, right? You see where this is going. Okay, I should be able to do this. I'm a developer and I'm smart and and I've run marathons before, right? I'm talented. I'll show you. And then the teacher's like, you need to relax. And you're like, no, I'm going to show him how not relaxing will do it. You see what that is? It's a lack of humility. It's like forcing things. It's saying, no, I need to prove that I can do this, so I'll just try harder, right? Whereas this is more of a thing of just like trusting that you can do it, which means actually you would try less. Because if you can do something and you're confident that you can do it, it's effortless. Going back to driving the car. When you get in the car, probably one of the most dangerous things you can do is be like, I'm gonna drive the crap out of this thing. And like 37 degrees, 37 and a half degrees, 30, boom, you crash into a car because you were overly focusing on one random detail, right? The best thing you can do is say, I drive safe, I don't even have to think about it. Let your intuition take over, right? Because then you're gonna like enjoy the experience more, you're not gonna be caught up in a whole bunch of details that creates more details that you can trip over, right? So I hope that you're seeing that the reason that people go towards this like more overthinking kind of thing, it's a lack of humility and it requires patience. For example, at this step, right? When they're playing the thing and they miss one note, if you immediately say, okay, I gotta focus on that, and then you go, it's not working, that's a lack of patience. It's a lack of humility, right? But if you're over here and you're playing this and you miss one note and you think, that's okay, my brain will figure it out. If I just focus on this again, it'll actually probably come out right. It will. That's the thing. That's the thing. A lot of times on your first try, you make a mistake just because it's your first try, right? I'm convinced that if I threw a tennis ball at you and you just thought of hitting it over the net and I told you nothing about tennis technique, the first time you might not hit it, but if I threw it 2 or 3 more times, you probably would. And that's the thing. You don't need to get caught up in all these details, right? And it actually would be easier to just try it again, right? So then it's like, oh, I missed a left. I don't even have to think about the left. And if I do, maybe it's just a little intention here. It takes a little bit of my brain. And then I'm just in this state where I'm super zen. And it's like the ideas just kind of solve themselves, right? This is really important because if you have this kind of patience and humility, imagine when you get up onto stage, right? So like you're going to perform, right? What state do you want to be, right? Do you want to be in this state where your brain is full and you're like almost at capacity? Your engine is about to explode, right? And at any given moment, if you fill it over the top, then it's going to come out all messed up and you're going to get lost and you're going to get confused. Or would you rather be in a state where you're kind of on autopilot, you have a whole bunch of space to think about something else, right? Imagine if the ease with which you drove your car or brushed your teeth, that you had that same ease when you sat down at your instrument to solo over There'll Never Be Another You or something like that, right? Then you have all this space for other things, right? Things that you want to think about. Things like, the other musicians you're playing with. What are they playing? Things like the other people in the room, the audience, right? How can I enhance the quality of this room, right? Things like the sound, like, oh, what's this room sound like? It's a little echoey in here. Okay, I'll adjust my touch. Things like, maybe the energy, right? Trying to draw a fire. I don't think it's going to work. The energy of the room, right? Like, oh, let's push this so that it grows every other chorus. Instead of just having to fill your entire brain with, what am I playing? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? How many 16th notes are on my left hand? Oh my gosh. You don't want to be in that state, right? So if you really want to perform like this and stop overthinking when you get on the bandstand, you have to practice like this, which is by having the patience and the humility to practice one thing at a time and to not think that I should be learning this faster. So if I force it, then it'll learn faster because I'm so smart. No. To instead think, it's normal to mess it up the first time, but if I just think of the same thing, I'll probably figure it out. right? And then trusting, if that doesn't work multiple times in a row, then you can add a little bit of intention. And then, it'll sink back in, it'll go back to the same amount of thinking. Once you start implementing this, what's gonna happen? So let's say that your practice, if we were gonna graph it on a little graph like this, right? Where you have results up here and practice time down here. Okay, so your practice probably looks something like this right now, right? When you first started, boom, it was like, the more I practice, the better I get. This is so fun. And then you got excited because you're like, maybe I'm kind of good at this. So you started growing a little faster, right? And then one day you had this session where it's like, that's not right. Let me try to fix that. And then as the session went on, it kind of got worse and worse. And you're like, what's going on here? Okay, I just got to take a break. And the next day you come back and it's like, boom, it's way better all of a sudden, right? And then you're like, okay, wait, what's going on here? Okay, let me make it a little bit better. And then at that session, it got even worse. And then the next time you're like, okay, maybe I need to take a week off or something, right? And you take a week off and you maybe get a little worse because you're not touching it. But then you're like, now it's time to practice again. I think I'm ready. And boom, all of a sudden you're way better. And you're like, hold on, what's going on here? The less I practice, the better I am, right? And then you start getting in your head and your practice process is messed up, and it's kind of like your progress it's like that, it's all over the place. It's up, it's down, it's inside out, and it's very unpredictable. And what that does is it kind of kills people's passion, because people want to feel like, I want to feel like this. When I work on something, I get better at it. It's fun to get better. That's a big reason to play music. It's always something I can get better at. That's why I wanted to play music, right? So here's what happens when, you take some of these concepts and you start to practice a little bit more like this, right? What happens is that since your brain is freed up and you start to internalize things with muscle memory because you have head space to actually internalize it and learn it, your practice progress starts to look more like this, where the more I put in, the more I get out. Now, wouldn't that be nice? If you could just spend the rest of your life getting better and better and better. Now, here's the thing. There's another level to this, because, let's say that, you're always kind of practicing at this level, right? I just always focus on here. I just focus on the one thing, right? What you're going to do with yourself as you go is you're going to build up trust in yourself. That even if I don't focus too hard, I still get results. And what that's going to do, if you can continue to trust yourself even more and do more of the inner game of tennis thing where you're just seeing the ball go over the net, stuff like that, well, then it's actually going to take even less headroom for you to learn things, right? Because you actually trust that it's not about how much you think, it's about kind of who you are and your patience and your humility and your character and your passion and your ability to keep doing this. So it actually takes even less thinking. It takes less effort from you. That's going to make you not just grow linearly. That's going to make you grow like this, exponentially. Because it takes less and less of your brain to learn more and more. And you have more fun doing it because it's not so exhausting, which means you can do it for the long haul, you can do it faster, you can do it forever and enjoy the process. So, if you found this video interesting, you like this kind of philosophical, kind of theoretical thing about music, you might enjoy my video that's called Touch, Tempo, and Dynamics. I'm doing more of this kind of thing, and I just really hope